to. But for now, we'll get back to production guide business, and to remind everyone where we're at, just show the agenda. We're moving on to Dawn Magnuson for production guide updates. So take it away, Dawn.
Oh, could I interrupt? It's Glenn.
Yeah, please.
Just before Dawn starts, remind everyone that you can get PAC points, pesticide applicators recertification points, and the best way to let us know about that is on the chat. If you enter your name and hopefully your PAC certificate number, or if you don't have that with you, your phone number, and then that way we'll know you've attended this session and get you the points. And we are recording this, so anyone who's not here will be able to watch it later. And the intention is to have that quiz, and answering the quiz question appropriately would get you the points for those unable to attend. So if you meet your neighbor and they go, oh darn, I forgot, they can still benefit from the content and get the PAC points. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Glenn. And one more update that I failed to mention. Evan Esch will be giving an update on oil and moth in the Tfpg section. So just so you're prepared for that. Go ahead, Don.
Hi, everyone. Just please let me know if you can't hear me okay. I'll try to speak louder. Shoot Lindsay a note or something. Or anyhow, I'm going to go through the updates to the guide, and there's quite a few, so I'll try to go as quickly as possible. Keep in mind as we go through the rates, the liters per hectare is the first one, and then the milliliters per acre is the second one. So I'll probably just say the first one just to keep it quicker going through. So the first, we start with pesticide label expansions. Moravis Duo. The crop is cherry and peach. Powdery mildew is a pest, and 1 liter per hectare is the rate, application rate. Group 7 and 3. Restricted entry interval REI is 12 hours, maximum 2 applications per year, and then switch to a non-group 7 and 3 fungicide. Another label expansion is copper spray. The crop is apples, pest is apple scab, and the rate is 6 kilograms per hectare. And group M1, REI for hand thing, it's 35 days, and all their other activities, it's 12 hours. Apply at 7-day intervals, and maximum number of applications is 4. Another label expansion is the sulfurs, Cumulus DF, Cosavet DF Edge, and Microthiol Disperse. Group M2, the crop is peaches and nectarines, pest is powdery mildew, and the rate is 7 kilograms per hectare. Active ingredient sulfur. The application interval is 10 to 14 days. REI is 24 hours. PHI is 1 day. Maximum number of applications is 8. Lots of numbers in this presentation. Timing, apply at Husfall, and a warning, it may cause injury during hot weather. Another label expansion is Pure Spray Green Mineral Oil. Group is non-classified. Crop is palm fruit, and pest is codling moth, and the rate is 10 liters per hectare. REI is 12 hours, and you should apply it at just before egg laying. Apply in a minimum of 1,000 liters of water per hectare, and do not use in combination with or within 14 days of sulfur or Captan. Another expansion is Nialta, group 25. Crop is stone fruits, pests are mites, and the rate is 1 liter per hectare. REI is 12 hours, application interval 14 days, and maximum number of applications is 2. So moving on to new registrations, we have Gatton, which is group U13. Crop is cherry, pest powdery mildew, and the rate is 400 to 690 milliliters per hectare. Application interval 7 to 14 days, and REI is 24 hours. For this year, maximum number of applications is 4, and suggested to use a higher rate and shorter spray interval under high disease pressure. Another new registration is Princeton, group 3. Crop is stone fruit, pest is brown rot, and the rate is 300 mils per hectare. REI is 3 days, And you should limit sprays of class 3 fungicides to 2 per season for resistance management. Another new registration is ECHO. Group is M5. There's 2 different groupings. One is stone fruits, is the crop, and the pest is brown rot, and the rate is 3.5 to 6.3 liters per hectare. And the other group is peach and nectarine. For peach leaf curl, the rate is 3.5 to 4.9 liters per hectare. And the REI is 12 hours to 11 days. And warning is do not apply ECHO after shuck split. Another new registration has a number of things on it. Magister SC, group 21 and 39. First crop group is palm fruit, and the pests are apple rust mite and pear rust mite. The rate is 1.75 liters per hectare. And then after that, it's palm and stone fruits. For European red mite, Daniel spider mite, and 2-spotted spider mite, rate is a range of 1.75 to 2.34 liters per hectare. And then pears, the pest is Persilla. The rate is 1.75 to 2.63 liters per hectare. And then the last one is palm and stone fruits for powdery mildew, and the rate is 1.75 to 2.63 liters per hectare. And the PHI is 10 days, REI is 12 hours to 17 days, and the maximum number of applications is 1. And there's a note, it's toxic to bees, so avoid application during bloom. There's some updated REIs for Captan, apple scab and apple. They have 2 different REIs, one for high density production and one for larger trees. So I've just put in the high density production here. You can find the larger tree REIs on the label if you need. For high density production, hand thinning and hand harvesting is 15 days. Hand pruning and training is 6 days, and all their activities is 2 days. Updated REI for Pinkoseb for apple scab and apple. REI for hand thinning is 35 days. All their activities is 12 hours. And I think there was some discussion about PHI. The PHI for this is 7 days. And an updated REI and PHI for Imidan, 70% WP, wettable powder. There's 2 different types of this, so it varies depending on which type you're using, but I believe 70% is what is being used, by, at least by one of the larger retailers. First crop is apple and pear. Pest is codling moth. REI is 12 hours to 9 days, and the PHI is 22 days. And then peach and plum pests are peach twig borer, spotted winged Drosophila, and it's 12 hours to 4 hours for REI, and PHI is 17 days. There's been some herbicide additions. So Brolink for grass and broadleaf weeds, Serene for annual weeds, and Assure 2 for annual weeds and quackgrass. The herbicide table has been updated. So if you go into the guide and click on pests at the top, you'll get a drop-down menu, and you can click herbicide overview and click on download herbicide table, and you'll come up with this table that Ken Sapsford has updated, and it's got goes further down, this listed alphabetically and by groups. And also on the weeds, we're looking to making changes to the weed section. Hopefully going to be digitizing the tables into an online database similar to the same as what they have for pesticides. The rodent section's been updated. If you go into pests and click wildlife damage and then rodents, you come to it. And I want to thank contributions to this section from Laura Feeney, Thomas Sullivan, Lindsay King, and Lindsay Hainstock. They've also added a fact sheet called Evaluating Tree Fruit Bud and Fruit Damage from Cold. If you go into horticulture and then click on crop management, and each of the crops has it a few lines down. If you click on the link, this fact sheet, you'll come to this fact sheet from the Colorado State University.
Don, I just noticed Madeline has her hand up, and I wasn't sure if you wanted to hold questions till the end or while you're going through.
I'm just about done here, so. Or go ahead, Madeline, if you want.
Yeah, first question is just if we can get a copy of your notes, because that was pretty quick to be writing down.
I'm not sure what Glenn's plans are. We usually send out a supplemental, and I think I'm not sure if he's making the PowerPoint presentation available. I think for people that wanted.
Yeah, we'll put that on
points.
our website probably. I can't remember if we listed it under grower records, your next item there, or maybe under the updates. There's if you go to the tree fruit production site under grower under updates, which is I think at the top right hand side, there is a record changes. Yeah.
My other comment is about this herbicide spreadsheet you were just showing us. Can we make a link for that under pesticides instead of under pests on the production guide website? Because I was looking for it and I couldn't find it. Because under pesticides, there's a herbicide section which lists all of the herbicides, but there's no download table on that page. It's under pests and weed control, which no, it's not even under weed control.
Yeah,
Oh.
if I could address that, Madeline, this is Glenn. We have had initial discussion with Ken Sapsford about what you're speaking of. And so we need to get together in the next few weeks and make that accessible through the same sort of spray schedule area. So we are planning on doing that.
Okay, my comment is just that it's hard to find.
Yeah, and so if it's under the spray schedules, it'll just be instead of apples and cherries, there will be one added under there that will likely say weeds.
There already is. There's a herbicide one on this under spray schedules. It says insecticides, fungicides, herbicide.
No, under the spray schedule section in the middle of the page, we'll add weeds there, and it'll take you to a similar table that will be updated and shareable. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so as Glenn was saying, we've added the growers records have been updated. If you go into resources and then grower records, you'll find the two forms there. And that's the end of the presentation. Any other questions?
Thanks, Don.
Just a moment. I do have a question, Don.
Sure.
There seems to be an issue, particularly in Ontario, around the issue of schedule or group M fungicides and PMRA reduction from 8 for 4 applications. Does that apply to Cumulus, which falls within that grouping, or not?
Maybe Ken can answer that one. Maybe that would be better if he took that one on.
It was
That's next.
Yeah.
Ken's next.
Yeah, I would have to have a look. Leni, the new pathologist within Kelowna, she can have a look at that. Yeah, I haven't heard that myself, and so I'll have to have a check into that with Lee.
Well, I know it's creating quite a fuss in Ontario around the issue of reducing applications per season for that M group. And I just was curious as to whether the Cumulus fell within that group. Thank you. And that was a PMRA decision, I gather.
It looks like Susanna has her hand up. Go ahead, Susanna. Susanna, are you there?
Sorry. Yes, I'm here. Sorry. Don, someone had brought to my attention that the change log, I think some of the changes you've made, they are not showing up, the most current ones. So if you can go and have a look later so that it shows all the changes that have been made to the guide I had
Okay.
gone, I couldn't find Manchester because you just recently added it. So maybe there's a glitch somewhere. At least if people are looking for a quick way as to what has been currently added, it will be good to make sure that that one is up.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
current so that people can know, because there's a lot that has been added, and I think that's a quick way to find out what the changes are. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Susanna. Okay, any other questions before we move on? Seeing none, I'll pass it over to Ken Sapsford to update us on pesticide registration and rodenticides. Go ahead, Ken.
What, let's get back here. Okay. Dawn has done a good job covering off all of the new additions of and whatnot, all the grouping. So there's some regulatory changes, and some of these have came in the last couple of years. And I know that you know, some things get regulatory changes, they don't get updated to the growers, and so we'll cover off a few of these. And this happened a couple of years ago, that drift is now a regulation, and it was presented a while ago. So now the Ministry of Environment has a regulation that says the person who applies pesticides for in an agricultural operation must not allow that pesticide or drift to enter a water course, which is, we agree on. But the big change is this last section here, that all precautions that are reasonably necessary to prevent an unreasonable volume of pesticide spray drift from crossing the property boundary are taken, unless the person in possession of that property into which the drift crosses allows otherwise. So what that is stating, that is, it is now in an act that's a regulation, that if there is a pesticide drift, an unreasonable volume of pesticide drift that crosses a property boundary line, that person complains about it for whatever reason. They send out a compliance officer from the Ministry of Environment. If you've been found negligent, then you can be fined for that and made to correct it. That can be anything from spray drift going on to somebody's yard, or if you have a neighbor who is growing a different crop and the drift goes across there, an unregistered product. I have seen that a few years ago with the unregistered product showing up on cherries, but it was actually registered on grapes. Never proven where it came from, but it probably came from the product being sprayed by a neighbor and drifting onto the cherries, which becomes an MRL condition. So there are things that you need to do. So we need to take and make sure that we're doing everything possible to avoid our spray drift. And part of this, and this is nothing new for orchard growers, we need to keep records. It's now in the act that there must be a record kept, the date, the time, location. A few things in here are different from what you need to have for Canada GAP and food safety. And that is, you need to take and record the temperature, precipitation, wind, speed, and direction at time of application. This type of information is for your protection, because if you've got a record of the wind speed and the direction, and then there's a complaint by a neighbor, and you can say, look, here's what I did. There's no way that there would be an unreasonable volume. And so that is something you need to take and make sure of. Add those few things into your records to ensure that you're compliant with the spray drift regulation. A year ago, WorkSafe BC, and this was mentioned in an earlier meeting, but I wanted to update it again. They changed what they classified as highly toxic, moderately toxic, and slightly toxic products. And they changed them so they match with the PMRA's symbols on label. So now highly toxic product by WorkSafe BC have the stop sign. The moderately toxic products are inside that diamond sign, and the slightly toxic are the caution sign. What this did though is it moved their regulations for WorkSafe BC still state that if you apply a highly or a moderately toxic product, you must have a pesticide applicator certificate. When they changed their LD50 requirements to match up with the PMRA labels, that means now that any product that has the stop sign or the diamond sign on the label, they require a pesticide applicator certificate when you're applying that product, according to WorkSafe BC requirements. So it has moved products up into that category. One that surprised a lot of people is lime sulfur. Lime sulfur is now a product that you require a pesticide applicator certificate because it is a moderately toxic product as well. So the products that we have, and these are in the production guide, there's the table of pesticides that list whether or not a WorkSafe BC requires a pesticide applicator certificate. So there's a list of the insecticides that we have that require it. And of course, the insecticides, there's more of those that require a pesticide applicator certificate. For fungicides, we have Approvia, lime sulfur, Magister, Maravon, and Ridamol Gold. They all require a pesticide applicator certificate. And 7XLR is the only thinner that required it. None of our herbicides at this time are requiring a pesticide applicator certificate through our WorkSafe BC. There's also new tank mix regulations coming out. Right now, as the old, any two products can be tank mixed if they are both registered on the crop and do not specify otherwise. That's what's been happening in the past. The new regulation is that the Pest Control Product Act states that no person shall apply a pest control product in a way that is inconsistent with the direction on the label. So as a result, if the label just has no guidance related to tank mixing, then a tank mixing is not permitted. So the new labels are required now to have a statement saying this product may be tank mixed with registered pest control products whose label also allows mixing provided the entirety of both labels. So that the new labels coming out will have this statement. There's also another part of this statement that states about tank mixing the pesticide product with fertilizers or other products as well. Originally, when this came out, they have stated that there is a 2-year time period for registrants to update their label. We were concerned about Canada GAP food safe auditors looking at this. So PMRA within the last 3 weeks here has updated their requirements, and now it states right on their fact sheet that growers and applicators have 2 years before they have to comply with the new tanks mixing requirements. In that 2-year time period, we're hoping that the labels from the registrants get updated, but the Canada GAP auditors, they will not be, they can't take and say there's no tank mix on here. We've got a 2-year grace period before this comes into effect. Consequently, yeah, product labels that are silent with respect to tank mixing, tank mixes are not permitted. Some of the new labels, I've just had a look at a few that have just came out with some changes to the labels, minor changes. They do have the new tank mix statement on them. Hopefully within the next 2 years, that will happen. So any of the products we use and normally tank mix, we can still continue to tank mix them. But you're going to have to start looking at the label to make sure that it is tank mixable. Rodenticides, the Ministry of Environment also came out with a new regulation on what they classify as second generation anticoagulant rodenticides you'll hear these being referred to as SCARs. So SCARs are the commercial class of pesticides registered in Canada for rodent control, and they can only be used by certified pest control operators and farmers. The SCARs that this concerns, there's 3 active ingredients: protofucium, bromadiolone, and diphenthiolinone. But these active ingredients are the highly toxic ones. And as growers, we've known these as the ones that work, but they cause death by internal bleeding on a single feeding. As of January 21st of this year, and essential services, including agriculture, who use these SCARs will be subject to the following. There's a mandatory certification requirement, so you need to go to the Ministry of Environment website and you can use your pesticide applicator certificate, will be qualified as certification, but they also have a new rodenticide certificate. You also need a license. A license is a $250 annual license in order to purchase these products. And upon purchasing at the point of sale, you need to have those documents available. They're only able to sell them to people that have those documentations. You also need to develop an IPM plan for rodent management. You need to look at the mandatory use of prevention and implementation of alternative controls, such as traps, etc., must be used before you can use the SCARs. You must safely dispose of the SCARs and the poison rodents, and you must limit the application period to 35 days at any one time for a maximum of 120 days through the year. There's a lot of restrictions they are putting on the use of these rodenticides. When we look at the rodenticides that we have available, there are some non-conventional, white mustard seed powder, cellulose from corn cobs. There's the non-anticoagulants like the zinc phosphide. There's the first generation anticoagulants that we've known as warfarin and the other ones. This regulation only applies to what I have in the yellow, which is the second generation anticoagulants. These products can be used indoors or within 15 meters of a building. They can't be used. The only other place is they can be used up to 100 meters from building or structure if bait if bait is placed along a fence line or in secured tamper-resistant bait station. So there is some exemptions there, but those are ones that we need to take and have this regulation is required. I tried to look up the trade name, think that we might have a short list. That's not the case. There is a number of trade names, and depending if they are the soft bait or the hard bait or the water soluble products. So Boot Hill, Mackay, Contract, Hawk, Resolve, Resolver, Decimax, Halon, Rat Tack, Jaguar, Hombre, First Strike, to name a few. So there's a lot of products out there. These are no longer available to pick up off shelf. You need to talk to the retailer to get them, and you need to have the license and the certification and an IPM plan in place in order to purchase them. If you want to investigate this further, just Google agriculture rodenticide rules have changed, and that'll take you to the Ministry of Environment website where there's some documentation. Or you can Google pesticide certification and training. And this will take you to this page in which over on the right-hand side, you can order study materials online and you can select the rodenticide certificate. So there is a number of regulations that have been put in place by the Ministry of Environment in BC. and by PMRA Health Canada. And like you'll notice, the presenters on this call are from the Ministry of Agriculture. So we're just kind of the bearers of the information to you and hopefully help you along to make sure you're following the regulations. So if there's any questions, I would gladly answer them now.
Thanks, Ken. And I see that Laura Feeney from Health Canada put a bunch of helpful links and information into the chat. Any questions? We can always circle back later once people have a bit of time to let it marinate.
I have one question about enforcement of drift or issues around drift. We're in a very windy valley, and at times there are sprayers going or operating while it's about 20 to 30 kilometers an hour or more. And I just wonder how this is going to be enforced insofar as there's nobody within easy reach of this area that's going to in any way ascertain how that's going to be enforced.
That regulation is through the Ministry of Environment. So anytime there is someone who has an issue or they complain through their tip line. And so even a pesticide drift is the same as for the poaching line and everything else. So it's through their tip line that the person would have to call in. And then when the call says, I think there's a problem with the neighbor was spraying and there's drift blowing onto my yard or whatever. And then they are responsible, the Ministry of Environment, to contact a compliance officer, and they would come out and investigate the situation.
Thank you.
Laura Feeney.
I can't speak for the Ministry of Environment, but I do have to respond to a lot of drift complaints, and the vast majority of them have to do often with spraying and high winds. And I will say that when I go out, it's just a he said, she said situation. But if you can take a video or a picture, and also that's helpful. And also if you can capture in that video, perhaps like some vegetation nearby that's blowing in the wind, then that's helpful. Just in excessive situations. And not really relevant to yours, but there's a difference between steady high winds and gusting. And I can't speak for the Ministry of Environment, but if it's a low wind day, but there is gusts here and there, I don't expect people to stop every 15 seconds and turn off their sprayer for those gusts. But if it is a situation where it's clearly high wind and excessive drift, and I often see it blowing, across the road and into other areas, video and pictures are helpful. Otherwise, if there's no evidence, there's just nothing we can really do aside from education.
Thanks for that, Laura. Okay, our next section are the insect updates. So we'll start with Dr. Susanna Akjiapong, and then we'll move on to Evan Esch. So Susanna, can you share your screen?
Can you see my screen? It seems it's not allowing me. Okay, there we go.
Yep, looks great.
All right. All right, good afternoon, everyone. So it's going to be a quick one. I have 15 minutes and I'll try to stay on top of it. Can you hear me okay, Lindsay?
Perfect.
All right. So I'll give a quick update on one stink bug that we are seeing a little bit more of, an update on a brown marmorated stink bug. We're still talking about that one. There's some two insects on the horizon that we just want you to keep an eye out on. And we just do a quick review of some of the good bugs that we've been talking about the past couple of years. And I think big thank you for Dawn for doing the insecticide updates. So this one here is your controller stink bugs. We've seen last year we saw quite a few, and the other previous years too, we've seen them. There are years that they become a problem. So what you're looking for, they come in different colors. They come in different shades of green, the adults. And then you have browns and blacks. And they always have this orange borders around them. And you see the tip of the back there, you have this pale spot there. The younger ones, usually they will be black or a bit more grayish, and they are not as big as the adults, and they have the orange border as well. So that's what they look like. Let's move on. So they can go on, they can attack fruits, they can attack vegetables, they'll go on grapes, berries, and then ornamentals. The ornamentals that I've seen in the valley that they like a lot, they like Oregon grapes. So if you have Oregon grapes around and maybe you're seeing some of these stink bugs around the borders of your orchard, then probably that's where they are coming from. They feed on the Oregon grape berries, and they like this ornamental. It's called scarlet firethorn. They do like that a lot, and you find a lot on elderberries in years that you see a lot of these conchuela stink bugs around. Brown marmorated stink bugs, we've been talking about them for years, and I'm sure we all know what they look like, but just a refresher, if you don't know what they are the stink bugs. They have the white bands on the antenna, and then the younger ones will still have the white bands on the antenna, and the legs will have these white bands on them as well. So last year, we still set up 136 traps. That was the last year of our funding that we had for this project. And we use the same traps we've been using, the sticky traps with the pheromone bait for monitoring them. So for the past couple of years that we've been monitoring brown marmorated stink bugs, most of our survey areas, we found them in there. So we've had traps from all the way from Costin all the way to Salmon Arm. And we found them in Crescent in 2021. Last year, we did not find any in Crescent, which was good news. We have a brown marmorated stink bug reporting page, and we got some reports from Castlegar and Trail last year. So, and these, they sent in pictures and they were brown marmorated stink bugs. So they are in Trail and Castlegar, but these are very low numbers. So looking at our trap captures for the past 6 years, last year was the numbers were not very high, similar to 2019 to 2021 levels. We found actually our lowest numbers in August since we've been trapping, went out there looking for the parasitoid, the samurai wasp, and we could hardly find any brown marmorated stink bugs. So that was quite an interesting one. They are still hanging out a lot in the Kelowna area, very low numbers in other areas in the valley, which is good news. They haven't spread to our commercial orchards. I have not had any reports of damage to commercial fruit from brown marmorated stink bugs. The samurai wasp that we found in 2021, last year we followed up again looking for brown marmorated stink bug eggs in the downtown area, Kelowna area, and we still collected egg masses that we were able to rear the samurai wasp out of. So, which is really good news. The samurai wasp seem to be established in the Kelowna area, and that is good. So do we forget about this pest? No. Unfortunately, I was hoping we'll be able to stop monitoring, but down at the coast last year, brown marmorated stink bug was really, really a bit of a surprise. We got a lot of reports from the coast. There were high numbers of brown marmorated stink bugs. And since they detected theirs a year before us, we still have to keep an eye on this brown marmorated stink bug. Already we are getting lots of reports from the coast. They are beginning to wake up, and I've gotten like 2 or 3 reports from the Kelowna area. So we still need to keep an eye out on them, but we will have some form of monitoring, but not on such a large scale that we've been doing. We'll definitely have traps in the Kelowna area, and we'll follow up on the samurai was the parasitoid for this year. I did get a lot of some pictures of stink bug damage to apples, and then I think in peaches. Times it's difficult to tell what is it. If I don't have the stink bug, we cannot say it's brown marmorated stink bug. Some of the native stink bugs, the feeding damage is the same as brown marmorated stink bugs. So normally, if you're looking for the stink bug damage, it will be good. If you're seeing stink bug damage, look around a little bit to make sure that we know which who is the culprit. Is it a native stink bug? Is it a controller stink bug? Is it a brown marmorated stink bug? But normally with stink bug damage, the distinctive thing is you can have where they fed, you will have a depression, but then you can still see the stink in the depression. It can be confused with beta pit. So at times people will have the depressions on the fruit, but with the stink bug, this is brown marmorated stink bug damage, and any other stink bug species damage will be similar. You still have the sting on the fruit compared to bitter pit. That is that you don't have the sting, the feeding sting from the insect. Another pest that I think I've talked, okay, we should go back. Talked about oriental fruit moth before. It's a pest. Ontario has this in their pest complex. It's been in Ontario since 1925. In BC in the 50s, it was found here and they eradicated it. So we've been considered free of oriental fruit moth for a long time, and Canadian Food Inspection Agency always has traps in the valley to monitor for oriental fruit moth and to make sure that we are free of this pest for our export markets. Oriental fruit moth, unfortunately, they detected, CFIA, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, detected it in 2019. In Abbotsford, they followed up. What am I doing there? They followed up, and then since 2019, they haven't found any more, so which is good news. Unfortunately for us, they had a detection in one of their traps that they set in the interior, which was in Coston last year. So what they're going to do this year is to increase the number of traps in Coston and to make sure that we don't have this pest. So I'm hoping we don't have it, because it will be another pest that we don't want to deal with. So what are we looking at? They are small moths, and then they have this gray color. But then they will have this lighter chocolate bands on them. The larvae will feed inside. Usually they will do peaches and other tree fruits. The larvae, they will feed inside the fruits. When they are young, they are more cream colored, but then the later stages turn pink. And they also feed on the shoots of the tree, the younger shoots, the fresh shoots. So you get this flagging as well. So the primary host, they prefer peach and nectarine, but then they'll go on other tree fruits as well. They will spill over into apples. So if you find anything like that that looks suspicious, please report to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Or if you don't, you can always let me know and make sure that we get the report to the appropriate place. There is another one that I want you to be on the lookout for. It's called spotted lanternfly. It's a good looking bug, but it's a bad one. So hopefully we don't get this one. It's native to Asia, and then it's been in Pennsylvania since 2014. It's not been detected yet in Canada, but we are worried because it seems to be more in the eastern United States. They found them in the New York area, and in Ontario, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency keeps detecting these dead spotted lanternflies in some of the inspection things that they inspect. So they really worry that it's only a matter of time before these things show up in Canada. The bad thing about it is that it will attack more than 70 species of plants, and it's a very bad pest of grapes. They'll go on tree fruits, they'll go on walnuts, maples, and other forestry trees. And they like tree of heaven. It seems tree of heaven is one of these trees that is invasive, that Brahma Murita stingbug likes them. And then it seems spotted lanternfly also likes tree of heaven. And since its detection in Pennsylvania, there's been substantial losses to a lot of wine grape crops. So this is what they look like. The eggs don't look like much. When they are laid, they are covered with this waxy substance. It looks like a splat of mud or putty on the tree trunk, but as they dry out, you can see, you can see the eggs in lines there. They look more like beads. When they hatch out, the young ones, the nymphs, they have this polka dot coloration. They are black and white. As they get older, the last stage, you have these orange bright colors. The adults, they will have the back wing with the orange and dots on them. So when they fold their wings, you have this rosy hue to them. So that's what they look like. This is tree of heaven. We have them in the valley. They are not the nicest trees to have around. They have a brown testing, but nymph in there. So that's what tree of heaven looks like. And I'm sure most of you have seen them around. We have sumac, which is another native plant that we have around. They look a little bit like tree of heaven, but that's not the bad tree. So just the difference, you look at the leaves are totally different. They have these serrations on the leaves, and then the flowers, the inflorescence looks different from your tree of heaven. And some of the damage, spotted lanternfly, is a huge numbers of them. You get really large numbers that they can feed on grapes, they can feed on apples, and they are not flies. People, they call, I don't know why they are calling them spotted lanternflies. They are more in the plant hopper family, so they like aphids, leaf hoppers. They suck a lot of juices from plants and they produce a lot of honeydew, and that can be very, very messy. So you get all this honeydew, you get other wasps and ants around, and you get sooty mold. So it can be a big mess when you have huge numbers of these things. So they are not the nicest insects to have around, and we don't want them. So if you see anything like that and they're very, very distinctive looking, please report to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. If you find any bug, I usually say don't step on them first, at least take a picture, and then we can report them. We're always talking about the bad bugs, but then there are some of the good ones in there that once in a while I try to bring them up so that you see them, at least you know that there are some good ones in the systems. You have a lot of organic growers around, and a lot of people are trying their best to do IPM. So we have to be mindful of the good bugs. So this year we'll add on our lacewings. So we do get a lot of the green lacewings. We see a lot. There's some brown lacewings as well in the systems, orchards, and the eggs are really the coolest things. They are on these long stalks. So you see this in the orchard. Those are lacewing eggs. The larvae, they look like tiny little alligators. Sometimes if you use it doing a beating trays, you can find them on there. They'll feed on aphids, small insects, scales, mealybugs, spider mites, insect eggs. So they're really good to have in the system. And they are quite delicate looking, but they are good to have in orchard systems. Another one that looks like lacewings, these are snake flies. And these ones, they have these long necks, and that's why they look snake-like. And they are also good in orchards. Saw quite a lot of them last year, so it was nice to see those around. And they will feed on aphids and insect eggs, caterpillars, and they will feed on persilla as well. So if you see some of these in persilla or pear orchards, it's really good to find and see them around. And last year we went over the spider mite destroyer, the tiny little black beetles. These ones are really good. They look like ladybugs, but they are quite small, and they do a good job helping feed on some mites and mite eggs. So that's another one on there. Ladybugs, we've talked about those a couple of years ago. The larvae is the one that confuses people. They look like tiny little alligators, and then these are the pupa cases. So you see those around, they're good, nothing wrong, don't just ignore them. They'll feed on aphids and other good bugs in the system. Big thank you to all the summer students that help with all the projects we've been working on and all the funding sources and industry support and all the people who have been involved in some of the projects that we've been doing for the past couple of years. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, I'll take them. Lindsay, did I make it on time?
Yeah, that was great. Thanks so much.
Okay. I will stop sharing, right? Here we go. All right, here we go. I can hand it over to you.
Any questions? Hearing none, feel free to ask your questions later or pop in the chat as they feel up. And I would like to invite Lee Nee. And Lee had joined us more recently than other folks you've seen on the call today. And we're super lucky and happy to have Lee on the ministry team as the new plant pathologist. So Lee, if you are ready to present, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, perfectly.
Yeah. Thank you for the introduction, Lindsay. So, hi, everyone. My name is Li Ni. Oh, I'm going to share my screen. Can I share my screen? Lindsay, can I get the permission to share my screen?
I think Glenn's working on it. Thanks, Glenn.
Okay. Share. Yeah. Can you see my screen now?
Yep, that's great.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Li Ni. So you can call me Li. It's my first time attending the Tree Food Production Guide meeting. I was going to provide an update on fungicides, but I only have 2 fungicides that were updated by the end of last year. And thanks to Don, he did an excellent job updating the new fungicides. Sorry?
I think Evan's sound is working again, but there, he's muted. Go ahead, Lee.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, thanks to Don, he did an excellent job updating the new fungicides for 2022. So I'm not going to repeat the information. I will be presenting the new fungicides at the Tree Food Production Guide meeting next year for sure. Maybe some of you have met me at others meetings and have seen my introduction slide. Please bear with me for a few minutes. So for others who don't know me, I'm a new plant pathologist. Like Lindsay said, I just joined the Ministry of Agriculture and Food last year. So I was graduated from Simon Fraser University with a master's degree in biological science, specializing in plant pathology. I have a 3-year working experience in a plant pathology lab. I worked on cannabis fungal disease, and I'm familiar with molecular biological techniques. Although I'm new to the tree food industry, please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any disease issues on your trees. So I'm willing to help, and we'll try to find out solutions for you. And the follow questions later was asked by Sally early at this meeting. Would you mind email me your question, and I will try to answer your question and get back to you as soon as possible. And here is my contact information in a slide. Yeah, and thank you so much. It's a great meeting you all, and looking forward to working with you in the near future. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Lee. And
Yeah.
Evan, I think I heard your, oh, Ken, do you have something to say?
I was just going to mention that the question earlier was on whether or not sulfur was an group M4, which has restrictions. No, it's not. It is listed as a group M2. And so therefore it should not fall under those same restriction categories.
Great, thanks, Ken.
Can you hear me now, Lindsay?
Loud and clear, perfect.
Oh,
Thanks,
great. I got
everyone.
another headset here. Sorry about that, everybody.
No worries.
You can see my screen?
Perfectly, yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry about that, everybody. So thanks very much, Dawn, for the product update and the information with the label expansion for Pure Spray Green. I just wanted to give a little bit more information about how Pure Spray Green spray oil can fit into a conventional or an organic spray program. So this is especially for growers in Creston who may have higher codling moth pressure, or some growers in the Penticton Naramata area who have some higher pressure. So I'm sure everyone is very familiar with dormant oil. Some of you might not be as familiar with summer oils. Summer oils work by the same mode of action, by smothering soft-bodied insects and their eggs. Summer oils are much more refined and they go on at a lower rate than the dormant oils, so they don't cause phytotoxicity. So the idea behind this product and label expansion is that you want to try to smother as many codling moth eggs as you can with this product, and then you want to wait as long as you can for as many more eggs to be laid, and then smother them again before they hatch and damage your fruit. So getting the timing right with this product can be important, but it is relatively soft on beneficial insects early on in the season at a time when the beneficials are particularly vulnerable and important. And it also can get a number of pests at the same time your codling moth sprays are going on. So we'll also be getting European mite, red mite, and aphids and suppressing mildew early on in the season. So, so the first example I want to show you all here is how Pure Spray Green spray oil would fit into an organic codling moth spray program. So this little chart shows the percent of egg hatch through the first generation. And so the reapplication interval for Pure Spray Green is actually based on accumulation of degree days rather than a number of days. So it's not like the residues breaking down in the sun. It's that you want to get the eggs before they hatch again. So the way I recommend this product is used is in combination with a virus product such as VirusSoft or Sidex or Maddox HP. The reapplication period for oil, though, is longer than you would want for virus. So you wouldn't want to apply oil every single time you apply virus. Virus will be reapplied every 5 to 7 days, whereas you'd want to reapply your oil 10 to 14 days. So the example program I have here, this is what you would want to use if you have, a moderate to high codling moth infestation. So more than 1 to 1.5% infested fruit. So your first spray would go on around 210 degree days. This is before eggs start to hatch. Your next spray would be oil and virus mixed together. Then your following spray would be 5 to 7 days later, just virus. And then you'd want to continue repeating oil and virus or just virus. And then you're going to want to stay covered till around 550 degree days. And that exact date will depend on how hot it is that year. So the hotter it is, the faster those degree days are going to accumulate. And I will just state that, the higher the pressure you have in your orchard, the more moths you're catching in your traps. You really want to tighten up those reapplication intervals. So shorten things up more on the 5 to 10 days rather than the 7 to 14 days. You would then repeat this spray program if you continue to catch a bunch of wild moths in your traps or you were seeing lots of damage. So you would start the same repeating pattern for the second generation of insects around 750 degree days. Okay, so I think that Pure Spray Green is potentially a really good tool in conventional programs as well. It's relatively cost effective. It's soft on those good bugs that Susanna was sharing. And this program is actually the most recommended codling moth spray program out of Washington State. And we know that they really have their pest management stuff dialed in. So what they recommend for a codling moth management for conventional growers is that you start with your first spray of your conventional spray program at 200, 210 degree days with Pure Spray Green. Then you would apply your first conventional insecticide, so like your Alticore or your Intrepid or your Delegate, whatever your product of choice is. Apply your first spray at 290 to 300 degree days, and then your second spray 10 to 14 days later. So this way you have 3 sprays covering that first generation, but you have a softer product going on at the start of the generation when there's not as many eggs hatching and you're kind of going softer on the beneficials. And then when you have the most egg hatch happening on that chart, really starting around 300 degree days, you have your strongest, most concentrated residues going on your fruit. So this is a really good program to consider if you want to save a bit of money and also save a few of the good bugs. Just so as Dawn mentioned, there are a few things to consider with this product. Do not apply within 2 weeks before or after a sulfur-containing product, so Captan. I've talked with a number of growers. You may be able to cheat a little bit more shorter than 2 weeks. You may be able to get away with 12 days, but shorter than that, you sort of run the risk of burning your fruit. You're looking at a 1% solution. So if you're adjusting your spray volume with your tree row volume, you can also reduce the amount of oil you're putting in there. This product has not been tested on every single variety of fruit. So be cautious on russet prone varieties, especially if the weather is extremely hot that season, and a maximum of 8 applications per season. So this is a really good product to consider for organic guys. You're going to have 2 modes of action working against your codling moth problem. You can use it a number of times in the season, but if you're using it a lot for a number of years in a row, it can cause some stress to the trees. So be aware of that. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Thanks for the opportunity to give you a bit of information. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Evan. Any questions for Evan? Well, I hope there are some because I'm about, oh, good. Susanna, go ahead.
Thanks, Evan, for the program. My question is because we know for the conventional, because Washington State, they don't have sterile moths, right? So for our growers here, if you are looking at sterile moth releases and you have your threshold of two moths per trap, so how does that all fit in with sterile moth releases if they're going to use oil, at least for
Yeah, thanks, Susanna.
consecutive generations? Yeah.
Great question. Great question. Yeah. So what I would say is that they don't have sterile insect release. Almost everyone is using mating disruption. So hopefully, folks in Creston, if you have some codling moth in your area, you should be using mating disruption as well. The SIR program will increase the release rate of sterile insects based on how many moths we've caught in your orchard this year or last year. And if you have a codling moth problem, our supervisors will be contacting you and giving you spray recommendations. The one challenge is the more sterile insects we release in your orchard, the harder it is to catch wilds in your traps as well. They get filled up with steriles, and the sterile females release a bunch of pheromone as well. So the 2 moths for 2 consecutive weeks is a good rule of thumb, but also you should receive some guidance specifically from your local SIR supervisor. Thanks, Susanna.
Thank you.
The next portion of our agenda is the BC DAS update by horticulturalist Molly Thurston. And Molly wears quite a few hats. In the video that I'm about to share, she's wearing the hat of BC DAS coordinator. And I am going to press play and hope that that works.
Hi everyone, it's Molly Thurston. I just wanted to give you a brief update on the BC Decision Aid system for the season. So the big news this year is that we have expanded our weather station network to cover the Kootenays. And so this was a request out of many early meetings with Kootenay growers in order to be able to access the same models that the DAS is running. So the weather network has been installed over the course of starting last summer throughout the fall and winter, and is now operational and programmed to include these weather stations in DAS. So we've got a station in Grand Forks, and then we have several stations now located in the Creston Valley. So growers in those regions can select a station that is nearest to them, and you will be able to run the models that are functional throughout the Okanagan and Similkameen valleys for the Creston Valley and for Grand Forks. So that's great news. We do hope that there'll be further expansion in the network, and stay tuned for some updates on that in the future. For those of you that are first time looking at DAS, or perhaps you need to get reconnected to DAS, you can access the BC DAS system either through the SIR webpage. There's some information here on how to connect, or you can go directly to the DAS system through the web link that is given as ca.decisionaid.systems. And this will take you to the BC DAS sign-in login page where you'll fill in some information about your orchard, your location, and then be able to log in and find the stations that are most appropriate located for your particular orchard. If you do just Google or look for Decision Aid, it may be that you end up on the Washington State page. If you try to register there, it isn't going to go through for you as a Canadian grower. So just be aware that you want to be on the BC DAS page. And so there's a number of models to choose from. There's many different stations. We're up to almost 30 stations. Stations that are listed as Environment Canada stations, just be aware that you'll be able to get temperature and precipitation data, but you won't have the leaf wetness in order to run the scab model. So that will be something to just kind of pay attention to. For those of you that maybe had signed on to DAS or had a login at your email in previous years, and maybe you haven't been into the system for 1 or 2 or 3 years, you may find that your account has gone dormant. Generally, when an account hasn't been signed into for about a year, they do go dormant, and it's just in order to kind of clean up the back end of the programming. So please just check that your email address is still the same one that you had the account with. You'll probably get an error message saying that your account is inactive, in which case, please use the feedback button that is located within DAS. It looks like a little mail letter button here, and it'll pop up this window. And if you just want to put in a message there, I will receive that message and be able to help you with the inactivation, getting you reset up. You may have to reset a password if you don't remember your password. That's something I can't help you with. The password will go to, the reset will go to your email, and you'll just reset it like other, online programs that you might be using. But I can help you with the inactive account. Just send me a message, and it usually takes a day or two, just depending on how busy the programmer is, to go into the back end and do that. If you have previously signed on, and you need to change email address or something, that's no problem. You can go in and create a new account if that's the case. just feel free to play around in there. There's nothing that you can break. You can add as many weather stations as you want, which is a great benefit to the BC DAS system. We're not paying by weather station, which is what happens in Washington at this time. So here's my contact information. If you need more help than what you can get through using the feedback button, please feel free to email me. I'm happy to come online with you and get you set up, or help you get set up, or meet you in person if you're nearby. Also, there's a number of instructional videos on how to set up DAS and, you know, how to use some of the models that I have on the homepage. And so you're more than welcome to visit the homepage and check out those videos. So what can you do right now with the models? Well, the good news is that we are seeing a fair bit of activity finally in the orchard. It's running a little bit late this year, but there are a number of things that you can be doing in order to collect data that is really important to running the models. And so I do encourage you to be out scouting your orchard, because the crop stage that you're finding in your crop, whether it's apples or whether it's cherries, is going to be really important to put into a number of the models for disease in particular, in order to be able to get the most accurate readings. So you want to know where you're at with your bud stage. And I do post stories on the homepage in order to try to trigger you to go out and have a look, or with photos that identify the different crop stages, so that that can kind of help you out. And this is a good time for scouting. So you can be looking for things like egg masses. You can be looking for signs of insect or disease. Today, I was scouting cherries, looking at crop stage, and saw the first aphids that I've seen for this year. So those are important things that you can be doing. This is also a really good time to get your sprayer calibrated. And so I really encourage calibration happen annually. You need to be at least checking your calibration annually for your food safe program, but you know, also dialing in your spray so that you're getting the most effective coverage and using those machines really well out in the orchard. So I do want to mention a couple key models that are happening right now. Apple scab is a really important one. You've heard me talk about the scab in detail over the years, and I am going to be having a tailgate meeting again this spring in all of the different areas, and probably looking at about, you know, the week of May 8th or so to get out to the orchards. I'll be posting dates on the homepage of DAS, and you're welcome to come out and see other growers in the orchard, and we'll go through some of the spring IPM models as well. But for scab, it's really important that you're checking your green tip date. So we are solidly at green tip in the central and north Okanagan. In the south Okanagan, you've already been there and you're probably well beyond. So you do need to record that green tip date in the scab model for the weather station that you're going to use. So here is an example of the weather station near my farm in Winfield. This is an example I obviously did in 2019, but this was the green tip date. For reference, I mean, today I'm recording this on April 17th, but I set my green tip date for about Friday, which would have been the 14th, I believe. If I had my dates had all right, it's springtime, I forget what day it is. But Friday, I had green tip in the orchards in Winfield. And so that was set. And then I basically can start the scab model. So again, on this model, you can choose your management type. I've chosen organic for my farm here. However, you might choose conventional management. And that is going to trigger the DAS Mini Spray Guide to give you potential products from our BC Tree Fruit Production Guide in order to be able to plan a potential spray program depending on the weather. So remember, scab spores mature in the orchard. They're often found on the orchard floor. This year, I'm a little concerned that they might still be on some of those leaves that are hanging in the trees. So this is probably a really important year to be on top of your scab sprays. So those ascospores are going to be released off of the leaf litter. They're released according to temperature and moisture. And so those are the parameters that are being monitored with the weather stations in your area. And I will definitely talk about this in great detail with whoever is interested. So please just let me know. But definitely be in your orchard looking for the green tip date. And if you don't know what it is, feel free to contact advisors in your area or myself and get at least an idea of the date. And so the other model that's really important to be setting a date for, again, this is happening right now, is going to be the cherry powdery mildew model. And so here's a couple examples of mildew. Unfortunately, as many of you experienced last year, it was a really, really tough mildew year in cherries. And so these are pictures from last year. Mildew on the fruit, particularly late varieties like Staccato, Centennial, mildew on the leaves. And so you can see, you know, the white circles there, which is essentially the disease on the leaves, and the patches on the fruit. And so this is, again, a really risky disease to have, especially for export of our high quality cherries. So important to be aware that, you know, there may be more pressure going into this season after last season. Last season had a lot of vigorous growth. We had some humidity, some moisture right at the harvest time, unfortunately. And certainly with the crop loss, I think, you know, a lot of growers saw a lot of suckering, very tall trees, lots of growth. So those are some things that led to what I kind of figured, unfortunately, was a perfect storm in mildew last year. So right now you do need to be looking at the bud burst date, and you'll notice with the yellow arrow here on the one side of your screen, you input that date. So for example, we're basically in Creston right now, bud burst. Bud burst occurred, you know, probably 5 to 7 days ago in Kelowna area, depending on variety and depending on area. And I'm just giving you those kind of parameters so that you can be thinking about when you might have seen bud burst. And if you need a photo of what bud burst looks like, I again have posted one on the homepage of DAS for you to look at. So that's one critical piece of information to input into the cherry mildew model. The other is to put in the date that you do your first irrigation to thoroughly wet the trunks of the trees. For some of you guys, this might be happening earlier this season than usual. Sometimes we're, you know, often I would say we wait until after bloom to put irrigation on the orchards. However, I have some concerns. You know, we had a really dry fall. We're coming off a year of drought already, the heat dome prior to that. And, you know, although we had a fairly good snow cover, the snow cover, at least in the Okanagan, has been gone for quite a few months now. And we haven't had a lot of precipitation and moisture that has accumulated. So some of the soils I've looked at are pretty dry. And there may be growers who need to be applying irrigation prior to bloom. In that case, your date might end up being, you know, next week once your irrigation's on, just for example. So you would input that irrigation date into this table as well. And then the risk assessment for mildew, primary and secondary infection can run. So this model likely for many of us won't be active right away. Generally, we're going to see an accumulation of the risk and, you know, of degree days and building over time, and generally, you know, kind of shuck fall or so, we'll see some activity on this model. And although I, you know, realize many of us are spraying on a calendar approach for mildew, this is a really good tool to help you to target when to start those sprays. And so if you have questions about this, you know, definitely feel free to reach out, and we will be covering this again in some of our tailgate meetings coming up. All right, so I've given you a rundown on various things that are new. You will also potentially see the pesticide effect evaluator tool has gone live on DAS. This can be really good for looking at, in particular, your insecticide application. You know, did you hit the target with a codling moth or a leaf roller spray? You know, were you covered for the entire period where you might have needed to be covered? So that's a tool that growers can play around with. The calendar of events on the homepage is updated regularly with industry events and other events that might be pertinent for growers. And so you can check out the homepage and look for those events. Whenever I receive an event, I'm happy to put it up there. So feel free to send your events in as well. And there are a number of homepage stories, as I mentioned, in videos to help you through some of the models and understanding them and how to apply them. And I'd mentioned previously the Paracilla model. We're still undergoing a number of changes and trying to get that working appropriately. There's been changes on Washington's model and we're changing ours. So we're still only in a beta launch phase of that, which means that myself and a couple of consultants are using it in order to try to dial in the recommendations. So hopefully that will go live for next season. And I think that's about it for the update. Again, you saw my contact information earlier, and you're welcome to email me or reach out through the feedback and help button online. Thanks very much for your time, and hope you have a really good season ahead. Best wishes.
Okay, did that work smoothly for everyone? Great.
Yeah.
I see some head nodding. All right. Thanks to Molly for that. Awesome. And I would like to reiterate that that homepage is an excellent resource. Some really great seasonally appropriate stories on there, and also a great place to look for events. Does anyone have any questions? You can reach out to Molly about all of this, or we can pass along your questions. Done. Okay, we have another video update from Molly for the next topic, but I'd like to suggest that we move on to Nick Abuki now, if that works for you, Nick, to give us an update on new varieties.
Totally.
Okay, perfect. And then I'll queue up the next one.
Perfect. So BCFGA is just about to load this stuff onto the website. So I don't have anything to show you quite yet, but I'll just kind of walk you through it. So it'd be a bit boring. It's a lot of numbers anyways. What we've done is we've updated all the cherry info. So a lot of that stuff is a bit older in the tooth. So we took the recent ministry data, and they had kind of mapped out all the cultivars that there was at least 20 acres of. So we took everything that's beyond a minor cultivar for cherry and posted all the data for that. And then we also put it into firm tech data. So it was on the old Durafel for firmness. And then the next update over the coming months, we'll add some notes just to keep track of next to all the cultivars in terms of rootstock, productivity, notes like that, just to keep in mind, or if it's pollination issues. So some big changes there for the cherries updating. And then just kind of cleaning up the apples. There's a lot of the minor stuff that isn't grown beyond niche levels anymore. So for the production guide's sake, just kind of clean that up a bit. So fairly straightforward. Once some of the new cherries are released in the next year or so, we'll pop those on as they get released. So it should be pretty straightforward. The other upcoming little change that'll get next updated is I'll do up some generic rootstock info for the different apples, cherries, pears, and then Hal from the research station, she has some great NC140 trials, so she'll be able to put our realistic local comments, so a bit of local flavor to those to see how they apply to us specifically versus some of my more high-level comments that I'm going to put together. So that's where we're at with that. So just keep circling back to the production guide online, and you should be seeing those changes soon.
Perfect. Any questions for Nick? No? Okay, we will move on to our next video update, again from Molly. And in this video, she's wearing her other hat as owner and operator of Pearl Agricultural Consulting.
Hi, everyone. It's Molly Thurston, and I was asked to give an update on nursery material access, which is some committee work that a group of industry professionals have been working towards, which would enable growers to have better access to material that is grown outside of British Columbia in, for example, Washington State or in Eastern Canada. The committee is made up of individuals from the BC FGA, from Agriculture Canada, from the Ministry of Agriculture, and individual growers. And we've been working on this particular topic for probably just over a year now, although the work had begun almost 8 years ago when we first tried to look at fumigation requirements for products that are entering into British Columbia, and trees in particular. So the reason that we have an issue with importing a lot of our stock from outside of the province is the oriental fruit moth. And this is an economic pest of various different species, including pear and apple, crabapple, a number of other landscape trees like hawthorns. And the oriental fruit moth, much like a codling moth, will feed on the inside of the fruit. So the larva will burrow into the fruit, making it unmarketable. It will also attack the new shoots on fruit trees. And up until this point, British Columbia has essentially been free of oriental fruit moth. We did have a singular finding in recent years. However, CFIA has confirmed that this hasn't been found to spread into other areas. And so for this reason, any nursery stock that's entering into British Columbia from other areas of Canada or the United States, where there is a presence of oriental fruit moth, does need to be fumigated, and the fumigation choice has generally been methyl bromide. The product can be quite hard on the nursery stock, on the rootstock, and it's also a very onerous requirement on the nurseries, particularly in the US, where Canadians might be making small orders, for example, and these orders all need to be fumigated and inspected prior to going across the border. And generally, there's just quite a lot of effort that's required. Not all nurseries have a fumigation chamber, so there's a need to find a chamber, set it up with the authorities in order to get the phytosanitary certificate. And then unfortunately, we've also seen and noticed on our side of things where trees arrive and sometimes there is a performance issue with the bare root trees where there's been some latent damage in the roots or in the tree itself. And unfortunately, the losses, particularly on certain varieties of fruit trees, has been fairly high and more so than we would like to see. So in general, I just do want to clarify a misconception that is out there. You can still get nursery material from other areas, and that could be Ontario or Nova Scotia, or it could be Washington or Oregon. However, that nursery material at this point does need to be fumigated, and there's a bit of a misconception out there that there is no access, and that isn't true. I mean, a lot of product has come across the border. And again, just a reminder that methyl bromide is really a fumigation that would attack insects in this case. It might also deal with some soil-borne pathogens. However, it does not attack virus or phytoplasm like we would see maybe with little cherry virus or Western X. So it's still really important to be virus-free and have certified nursery stock that you are bringing in across either the provincial or the international border. So just to give you a summary of where we're at right now, as I mentioned, BC is the only commercial fruit growing area in North America that's free of oriental fruit moth. And at this point, CFIA has indicated that methyl bromide fumigation should continue to be required for any imports. The proposal that's been made through this committee and our work with the Northwest Nursery Improvement Institute, which is a group of nurseries that are located in Oregon and Washington State, our work has been essentially towards proposing a systems approach, which would allow the nurseries to implement some field controls, some trapping for oriental fruit moth, some spray programs, and a general monitoring system of the rootstock or the nursery stock that they want to send across our provincial or international border, with a series of inspections to ensure that that product is free of the oriental fruit moth, and that the systems approach would basically serve as an alternative to the fumigation process that's required right now. We've seen systems approaches happen in many different commodities. Many of you will be most familiar with the cherry example, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Also, just ongoing research is happening into other alternatives to fumigation. And I should mention, particularly here at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, at the Summerland Research Station, Dan O'Gorman has had an ongoing project looking at hot water treatment trials for nursery stock. Grape and apple has been part of that, along with Jose Urbez Torres. And so these researchers are looking at other types of alternatives to fumigation, and those might be available to us in the future. So when it comes to a systems approach, this has been implemented both in Canada as well as on imports of soft fruits from the United States to Canada and for many different markets. And so, as I mentioned, you might be most familiar with the BC example where we are exporting cherries to other countries. And for example, we've just recently gained market access to South Korea and before that, Japan for our cherries. And so as part of those systems approaches, we are doing monitoring. For example, we have the pest codling moth here in our orchards. Although they're not a huge prominent pest of cherries, it is a quarantine pest for Japan. So we monitor for codling moth. We do a spray program if we find codling moth. And that information is collected and gathered and submitted for inspection and approval by the importing company, Japan in this case. So the proposal on the table from the Northwest Nursery Association is essentially to do a similar approach with oriental fruit moth, have traps in those areas where nursery production is happening, apply treatments at threshold. For example, if 2 moths are caught in a trap per week, a chemical treatment or spray would be applied. There would be a component of degree day monitoring as well as phenology, finding the biofix. Many of you are familiar with that from our codling moth trapping in the past, or looking at first flight and what that looks like in terms of timing for when insect presence and feeding might occur in the nursery stock. There may be an option of using mating disruption, and of course there would be inspections prior to shipments. And any shipments that would come in across, particularly the international border, would be accompanied by a phytosanitary certificate. So that is the approach that's been prepared and has been presented at this point. And you can kind of see a timeline here of the work that is going on. And so our committee has been involved going back and forth with the Nursery Association and collaborating on the wording and some of the ideas behind the systems approach. In June, the industry presented a letter of support last year to APHIS, which is essentially the CFIA equivalent in the United States. And we just as an industry group said, we would be supportive of implementing this type of approach and testing it out and seeing if this might be an avenue under which growers could have more readily accessible rootstock or nursery stock from areas outside of British Columbia. So in the meantime, some political work has been going on behind the scenes, and APHIS has sent the systems approach to CFIA. So this is, the 2 governments are now in a negotiation phase and having a discussion at least about the initial review of that systems approach. So at this point, that is as far as we've gotten with the approach. CFIA will, in theory, make a reply to APHIS at some point in the future. It's really unclear what the timeline of that can be. As those of you that have been involved with the cherry export program for many years, it takes a long time for countries to come on board and reach an agreement and find a path forward with these systems approaches. However, the really good news is this is farther than we've ever been in the past. 8 years ago, it was a flat no, and this year we are definitely making some progress with the governments having this discussion about the approach. So I just want to thank everybody that's serving on the committee, and our tree fruit industry advisor, Lindsay King, has been the point person for much of the coordination of the committee work. And certainly when growers ask, like, what can I do in order to support? If you would like to prepare a letter of support, or you'd like to sign a letter templated by our committee, that is something that you can do in order to lend your support. And we're willing to take your stories and ideas as to how this particular approach could affect your business, what the economic implications are in terms of being able to access these products and rootstocks and nursery stock from other places. So please feel free to include that information in the letter of support and send that on to Lindsay King. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks to Molly for putting those videos together. I wasn't anticipating the end of video shout out, but I will indeed be accepting letters of support. And if you want any information on what those letters should entail, please send me an email and I'll get back to you with those details. And additionally, Glenn, Susanna, Jesse McDonald, and I are on that subcommittee, so all of us are available to discuss this work. Any questions about that? Hearing none, that was our last presentation of the day. Thanks everyone for joining us. I see we're at 63 participants, which is great. Oh, Madeline, yep, go ahead.